WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're positively down at Fadley's, the old Lexington market since 1872. The number over there. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. I have some instant lottery scratch-offs to give away. I'm looking for people. We got people eating crab cakes and nuts, potato chips back here. I'll be giving these away. I'm eating fried oysters. We're going to be doing the oyster tour beginning September 1st, 25 oysters in 25 days. If any of them are as good as these, I had never really had a fried oyster probably in my life until about a year ago, and I've just started eating these here at Fadley's. And if it's fried, I like it in general. So Peter Jensen joins us here. Also on behalf of our friends at Window Nation, 866-90 Nation. I'll put the hat on in a couple minutes. He is my favorite writer, curmudgeon from the Baltimore Sun. He has been on the program many times with Don Moeller. And, of course, see you later, Bill Henry, back running the city in the rain. Your staff wrote a thing about John Angelos a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
And you were part of that for opening day.
Yes.
And I said, it's time to call Jensen. I know you had some off-the-field issues and whatnot. It's so good to see you. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you. Oh, not at all, always for you, Nestor.
Well, I'm going to get you crab cake before it's all over, too, now. Do you eat crab cakes?
I can't. I'm allergic to shellfish.
Oysters have shells? I'm going to pull it over this way.
We're good. We're good.
That's more for me.
That's all right.
I'm thinking.
It's all right.
How's the sun?
Well, we're still coming out every day. So it's an exciting time, actually, in many ways. We have a lot of younger people. We have, a little more competition across town. It's energizing. It's been really, I think it's been good for the paper.
Well, I walked out of the airport bleary-eyed at 4 a.m. after getting stuck in Vegas for a while, coming back from Maui. And I walked in and saw Baltimore Banner has taken the Rusty Scuppers place in the airport.
Yeah.
And I saw it. And I like MTS. I like Kimmy. I have them on. The first thing that it said Baltimore Banner, sports. It was the first thing they said. And I thought, it's the last thing they did. I'm a sports guy. Sports has always been a real rev generator around the paper. I went back and got the 1966 preview section from the News American, the Evening Sun, and the Sun. I bought it up in Shrewsbury at an antique mall, and I saw the amount of ads in there. Jack Luskin on the back page and all that. Sports is still a real prime mover when a baseball team plays every day and plays well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my background, right? You remember me as a whippersnapper in 86, walking into the Sun. I'm 17 years old. I mean, it was a rich sports department, and so many of those, the Tim Kirkshins and Buster Olneys and
look at the impact they've had.
Ken Rosenthal. I mean, these were my colleagues when I was 17 years old. No wonder I'm well-trained and good at what I've done. But the Sun has had a real history with all that. And I had Dan here the last time we did the show here at Fadley's, was maybe January, maybe early February. Dan Rogers came, and that show he did with Baltimore, and having read him now for a lifetime, I've read him for 40 years, there's a part of what the Sun has that the Banner's taken some pieces and Pam and this and that, but there is this history and this foundational part of the Sun that I don't want the Sun to set. You know what I mean? I've been at war with the Suns in the 90s when I left and this and that, and Jamison Hensley's working there. Like, we competed. I have a tech service. We break news too. Lamar signs. We're all in it sort of together. But the notion that it wasn't good that it was just a one-paper, struggling paper owned by Adita, like, there needs to be more reporters. As a guy who's been thrown out by the baseball team and the football team, and a stronger paper or papers would have said to Chad Steele, you're not doing that. And that's the way it used to work. People say to me all the time, like, how could they throw you out? Won't Jeff Zrebeck and Jamison Hensley? No, this is designed to make them fear for their job. And that's where we are with journalists being intimidated, money going away. I worry about the future of cities because, let's be honest, I mean, Kathy Pugh might still be running the city if it weren't for you guys, right?
Well, yeah.
Like, literally.
Yeah, that's true. And let me say, important part of the equation is that politicians find less necessary to talk to reporters than ever because they have other ways to get their messages out through social media and other platforms.
Same as football players.
Yeah, right, yeah. So
that's one thing for football players and for the guy who owns a team to be taking $600 million of state money to fund his billion-dollar entity. Like, that's kind of gross on the face of it if it didn't involve football. But what's really gross is not to have the accountability to even live here or answer questions and then throw out 30-year journalists. Like, somebody else besides me in the media should be pissed about that. I think. And seeing you take on the baseball owner. And look, man, you and I could do. I've done 30 years on the baseball owner. I've written a book, the Peter Principles. I'm re-releasing that right now because there are a bunch of young people that don't remember the antics. You remember all of it. You're a baseball guy in a baseball city.
Right.
You went to work at the paper when the baseball team was the only entity here that was a sports team that mattered, right?
Yeah.
And then Angelos bought the team. And the antics of Angelos that first decade, it's incredible. And now we're 2 decades later, and they're winning, and the stadium's empty. And if there would have been more accountability all along, maybe it wouldn't have bottomed out the way it did. Because there's so much power in owning a team and throwing people like me out for asking questions that it intimidates the next line of people. And then he goes after Connolly on Martin Luther King Day, and you guys took a swipe at him, which got you invited here. We talk about the city, anything you want. Nobody punches at the owners other than me, and you one time. And I'm thinking to myself, that's so not Ken Rosenthal and Buster Olney and Marty Kaiser and Jack Gibbons, who always told me, you ask questions, you call bullshit on the questions and ask them twice, and then fact check, and then go back, and then you can write a column saying they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Well, let me say, there's a lot going on there.
Right, gotcha.
And one of the things that's going on is that there's a lot to cover right now and fewer people to do it within every media organization. So back in those days that you recall so fondly, how many columnists alone did we have? How many beat reporters? How many people doing sidebars? The coverage was broader and deeper because we had the manpower to do that.
This morning I would have woken up the day after a draft and I would have read, let's see here, if it was 25 years ago, Rosenthal would have had an opinion on Lamar.
Yeah.
Litwin would have had opinion on Bisciotti giving him the money.
Yeah.
Eisenberg would have gone tactical and written a background piece about DaCosta getting the deal done. And you'd have all this clarity in the Morning Sun the day after.
Mark Hyman would have had a piece about how you finance deals like that or the legal mechanisms.
Correct. Right. I mean, there would have been all of this information, trusted information from reporters who are seasoned. Dan Connolly's flippancy to John Angelos and John Angelos will never give me an audience because he's born on third and thinks he had a triple, right?
Yeah.
Provided an audience on Martin Luther King Day thinking that protected him from real questions, which was gross. But then calling out Connolly like, I think you people don't know this. And Connolly's like, dude, it's my job to know this. F you.
Yeah.
It's my job. I know everything you're doing, even though you don't talk to me and answer questions. It's my job to investigate you because the police aren't doing it. Nobody's investigating you other than us. Nobody's asking questions other than us. And you can't stand up. And we're now... Bisciotti's caught on to this. Bisciotti has disappeared now, too. He doesn't answer questions either, right? And that's not good. That's not what got the Ravens here. That's not what made the Orioles great. So from a sports perspective, I'm tremendously disappointed. Not in being thrown out as a journalist. That's scumbaggish. I mean, it really is. What they've done to me is sleazy, and anyone should see it that way. But the accountability to answer questions and when they do, and then he says he's going to open the books.
Well, I mean,
I mean, that's absurd.
No, he didn't mean it. I don't think he meant it. He said that to pacify whomever he was talking to at that moment, and I don't think he finally figured out he doesn't really want to do that very much.
Why are you the only one that's willing to write that's gross? I mean, that's my point. I mean, we said 5 columnists that would all call BS on that.
Okay. Well, let me offer some explanation.
Go ahead.
And one is that you mentioned the manpower thing. So there are fewer people to do that role. Secondly, I think when there are fewer people, they have to get the basics done. And so all these people are doing just the basics. Third, I think there's a reluctance for the media to write about the media in every occasion, to insert ourselves into the story, as it were. That's just a natural reluctance people have. But what concerns me the most about it is not that individual reporters sometimes get the back of the hand from the ownership. My concern is that the public dollars involved in supporting these professional sports enterprises are significant. And we have these multi-million-dollar sweetheart deals going with these guys, and that is what I would like to see held accountable. That is where I'm not convinced we have scrutinized enough.
Well, they said they've thrown me out because they're a private company and they can just do whatever they
want.
That's
absolutely true, and that is their right. However, the degree to which the taxpayers support this private company, that deserves to be scrutinized. Now, if they don't open their books, that's their right, absolutely. But if they're going to say they're going to do it and then don't do it, it's also our right to say you're a liar, and that's all. That's no question. And meanwhile, it's also our right to protect public dollars that, this 600 million of them that are going into renovations at Oriole Park, for instance. And I think that's a strong public interest going on right there. And I think sometimes ownership shows that it's gotten a little, takes all that stuff for granted.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, and the accountability part of answering questions, it's no longer required, and it's no longer expected.
Yeah.
Let alone demanded.
Yeah.
There used to be a demand for it, right?
Yeah.
And because it's the right thing to do.
Can I back? Because I'm not a sports writer, but let me back up and say, one of my first introductions to professional sports was in Cincinnati. So I worked for the Cincinnati Post, which was a very small afternoon newspaper. It's now out of business, like so many newspapers around the country. But because I was a young reporter in my 20s working in Cincinnati, I got pulled into major sports stories because they needed the manpower. So Pete Rose is chasing Ty Cobb's consecutive hit games. I have to help out with the coverage. So I get to meet some of these guys and see how sports writers live, which I had not seen before. And then I have to help. There's something else. There's a strike the next season for the Bengals. Yeah, this is like 83. 83. Yes.
Yeah, it's football strike.
So I have to go then to a Bengals game, and they pull me up to Paul Brown, who is even then like a legend, and he writes a note say, yeah, he can come cover the game for you. Personal note, he writes. I wish I'd kept it, but so what I witnessed about sports coverage then, and also drawn into like the record for Cal Ripken when I had to help out here, was that what a strange world sports writing is. And I know so you take it for granted.
I'm on the inside, so
yeah,
give me your observation on this.
Let me say, all right, several things. One, and I don't think people realize this, sports writers face the weird task of writing the same goddamn story every day. Especially baseball writers. They show up for work, and there's going to be a game played, and it's going to be with a baseball, and everybody's going to stand in the field and hit or catch the ball, and at the end of 9 innings, there's going to be one team's going to win and the other team's going to lose, and that outcome will then have to create a story. So you guys can see all sorts of subtlety there, but in the big picture, it's the same damn thing. 162 games every season, and there's a second thing. Everybody has to work the awful hours of a sports writer. So most sports writers write, as you know, second shift because the games aren't played.
As a sports writer, every story I ever wrote happened after 11 o'clock at night because I was an Evening Sun reporter. Yeah. The game would end. Right. Poor Jimmy Jackson would be running down at the Civic Center, and I get to pack up my bags, go back down to back down to Howard Street.
There should be a study about sports writing and alcoholism, because I'm certain there's a strong crossover, because so many of these guys worked till midnight, 1 a.m., and then go home and have to...
The weird part, dude, it never felt like work to me.
Yeah, because you've had... Oh, wait, that's another thing in sports writers. They're all hugely committed to their craft, right? They're people who have loved it since they were children.
Demand is this, and maybe I'll teach my audience something here, right? Yeah. Like when the first time I started covering baseball for real was in 92.
Right.
And my last name's Aparicio, so at that point, some of the older players would know my name.
Right.
The Latin players, obviously, and then they found out I didn't speak Spanish, which killed my credibility. It would have helped me immensely to have spoken Spanish in the 90s. It really would have helped me.
Yep.
But the credibility for any writer or radio guy, as I was considered by most people in the modern era, was in what you knew.
Yeah.
So when I would go into the 1992 Oriole clubhouse and I would talk to Rick Sutcliffe about his career, or talk to Chris Hoyles about him playing in AAA, knowing things about them when you meet them, they figure out whether And this was something that really worked against women, right? Because a woman would come, how much could she know about baseball, right? Well, Molly Dunham could know a lot, right? Susan Fornoff could know a lot, but I had never met girls like that when I was a kid in Dundalk, right? That really knew sports as well as I knew it because they were a girl, right? All these ball players, like, grabbing their nuts, chewing the tobacco, and they wanted nothing to do with women in the locker room.
Right.
But a woman like Bonnie Bernstein, who knew more about sports than me, could win them over. So for sports, it really was about the credibility of talking to the coach and knowing what the hell you're talking about. Because if you didn't, you were done.
Yeah.
Like, it always made me – Jack Gibbons sent me in the 80s to cover golf. The LPGA Championship was here. Annika Sorensen won it. The year before, it was in New Jersey.
Right. And
he sent me up to – and I'm like, go cover – it's like you're a reporter, go cover it. Yeah. Doesn't matter. You don't need to know golf.
Exactly.
I covered a triathlon. I knew nothing about triathlons, right? I always found those to be just awful because I was always sheepish. I really didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I was afraid of writing something wrong because I didn't know. I wasn't expert on it, And I pretended to be an expert about music. I knew a lot about music, but I was a kid. I know a lot more now. But sports was something I was fearless because I could win anybody over because I wasn't full of crap.
Right.
When I went up to a basketball coach, I knew the history of the Terps. When I went up to hockey, that is, if you're not, they put you on the Oriole beat within a week, you'd have been run off because, everybody would have found you to be not invested enough, not knowing enough history. Whereas any reporter can go out and cover anything, but when your investor reporters covered education for 30 years or Ed Gunt's covering whatever your beat is, when you know that beat, it's something. But when you don't in sports, you're done. I never understood why they would send a neophyte out to cover a hockey game who didn't even know the rules and had to write a game story.
Right. No.
I thought that's not fair to your audience, I think.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more, although I think knowledge enriches any coverage of any subject matter, not just sports. That's unquestionably true. However, the other thing that you probably don't even notice, but I noticed to me when I was a complete neophyte on this, is that I think sports writers get treated pretty damn well. What I saw firsthand was they get this great press area where they have this wonderful view of games. They have catering in the press area. They are fed often before games, although I believe news organizations also we pay for that, but the accommodation, free entry into the game, all that stuff, guys take for granted, and then access to in the locker room and to immediately following games. There are press conferences, that sort of thing. Let me say, in the real world,
it's not organized like that.
It's not organized like that.
You go out to the community and you write a story about a broken window.
You have to knock on doors.
Yeah,
you have to. Right. Nobody's out there arranging to hand you the story. Yeah, it's a little tougher.
Well, I think that's what makes journalism so hard. And I guess the big picture of this is you wrote this piece of criticizing the Orioles owner for being a friggin' liar, which he clearly is.
Right.
And lying is okay. The reason I did Free the Birds back in 2006 as a civic duty to my audience was I'm in there every day for the people, for the fans that are paying. And I'm here to say, and it was a Pacino moment for me and Justice for All, these people are lying to you.
Right.
And they're bringing me in as a reporter with a notebook, and they're just making ish up, and they want me to go on the radio and vouch for them and their credibility and their integrity when I'm telling you they don't have any. I've been here. They've lied to everybody. They lie to each other. It's a den of snakes, right? I mean, it's vipers. And I saw this in 01, 02, 03, 04, and the Ravens weren't operating like that at that point, right? The Ravens had a different way, and they were winning.
Yeah.
And they had won the fans over, right? And after Ripken left, that period, 02, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, they didn't win. They lost 100 games most of those years. During that period of time, I saw it hurt the city, man. I lived on the 23rd floor. I bought my condo in 03, and there were 2.3 million people going to the games, and all of a sudden there's nobody downtown. And I thought, where's the accountability? What is your responsibility in that the citizens bought the stadium for you? You bought it, and you've destroyed it, and you've lied to everyone. I did the walkout in 06 as an answer to these people are lying to you, and they're asking me to shine up their turd and lie for them. And I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And I'm not going to do it now for the Ravens or anybody else, because that's why people 31 years still listen to me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's how
fair.
you keep credibility, is by
fair.
not lying for them.
Say, you're talking about things that are far beyond my knowledge base.
No, what I'm saying is that the sports part of it and the reporter part is you're there knocking on the door, you're asking someone a question, you want to verify that it's true. If they're a known liar again and again and again and you're on that beat, you got to call it what it is. Right. You just do. And I think part of the integrity of being a journalist as a young kid was, if it's not true, you can't write it. And it served me well in real life, but it's been difficult because I have such a BS detector.
Right.
And I call you a curmudgeon. I mean, that's kind of a loving term to you. It's sort of like pointing out the obvious and calling the elephant in the room the elephant in the room. Journalists get intimidated for that, right? I mean, take Khashoggi backwards, right? And awful things that happened. But this notion that we had a president for 4 years that turned every journalist into a bad guy.
Right.
That's the part. I've always been proud of being a journalist.
Right.
Different than being, no offense to Dennis Galazos, a used car dealer, or whatever that connotation would be of not dealing straight. If you're a journalist and you don't deal straight, you're not a journalist anymore, right? I mean, that puts you out of business. That's what Jack Gibbons taught me.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Let me say, if we're talking more broadly, that it's complicated. It is, people have gotten polarized politically. And so one party sees mainstream media as the enemy, and the other party doesn't necessarily see them as friends, but doesn't see them that way. And then you have all these layers of intrigue. And you mentioned sports owners lie or sports executives lie. Everybody lies. We live in a world where people lie. That's what we have to deal with. That's reality. So you're always fact-checking. You're always looking to reinforce things. And sometimes you just have to present he said, and let people have to sort that out. It has changed everything. Social media has made people believe that they're getting the truth when they're not. And I have no solution for this. It falls on each of us to be our own skeptic, to be cautious about what we see, to look for trusted and reliable sources. But unfortunately, some people aren't capable or aren't interested in doing that. So the result is that people go to their corners and they believe certain things. And I don't know the solution.
Well, you write on an editorial page where you're opining about life in Baltimore generally, right? You can write about anything. Yeah. When something comes to you and you take a stance, an editorial, that's what papers have done forever, right? It's your job.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Peter Jensen, by the way, from the Baltimore Sun, here's our guest at Fadley's. Just to reset. You take that stance, and I wasn't a big reader of that when I was a sports writer as a kid. But as I've gotten older, and tax dollars and the city and the everything about being a 55-year-old versus being a 25-year-old in the toy department over on Calvert Street, taking that on as a challenge and saying, I think the mayor's right or wrong, or I think the controller's right or wrong, or I think, Annapolis is right or wrong or whatever. When basically there's so much that goes into that. It's more complicated than knowing Orioles history, right?
Yes.
I mean, it really, really is. Yes. And taking a stance on it and finding out, taking in what this guy said and these people over here said, and say, this is what I think. Or there aren't a whole lot of people that get to do that in a journalism space.
That's true. And let me say, it's not what I think. There's a board, an editorial board. We discuss things. I often write the editorials, but it represents the views of a larger group than just me.
What does that mean, a board? Tell me how it really works.
All right. So the opinion section of the Sun is governed by an editorial board, primarily 3 individuals. Okay. The opinion editor, Tricia Bishop, myself, and Michelle Deal-Simmerman are the primary, but also on any subject, the editor, the managing editor might also make themselves part of the board.
It's a bit of the voice of the paper,
It
right?
is. We regard ourselves as the voice of the paper,
right.
Yes. The op-ed, of course, is the outsider's voice. Our editorials are the voice of the paper.
Right.
So normally they run right below the editorial cartoon on the main opinion page in larger type to set them apart. And it says, I think, commentary is the title, but it's editorial.
Is it ragged right, too?
I think it might be. I think there's a man who knows his
14-point rag and right. Helvetica, Times New Roman.
Oh my
God. Go ahead.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that represents.
I got ink in my blood, dude.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I'm ink stained. Come on, dog.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
but
man.
it represents the opinion of the paper, and so it gets reporters in trouble all the time because we go after politicians that they then have to interview and don't appreciate the fact that
I'm
they don't
familiar
make
with that.
They don't make the distinction.
Hi, I'm from the Sun. What you guys wrote it? I didn't write it. That headline. I didn't write the headline. Right? I mean, people don't like criticism.
No.
They just don't.
No.
I mean, I don't like it either. I'm more comfortable with it. But when the criticism comes from a place of improvement, it's like parenting, right? Like, when the criticism is, I don't think you should do that, you should do this. One of the issues for the city in general and why we started Baltimore Positive is people say, what's Baltimore Positive about it? I'm like, well, I don't pretend to have solutions, but I'm trying to find the smart people to have smart thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? And the Baltimore Sun doesn't have solutions. If we did, we would have solved it a whole long time ago, right? But there are thoughts to say this is bad, this is good, and there are recommendations. Do you think solution-oriented when you're writing something like that?
Sometimes there are obvious solutions. Sometimes there are not. So I think of the process as a dialogue with the community, not from us high above deciding, it should be this way, but pointing out the hard truths. And then should be engaging a process through which collectively we help solve our problems.
Some people see hard truths as criticism, right?
Yes,
I mean, but they're still hard truths.
Absolutely. Listen, when after something runs in the paper, and this is just every day, I get, really nasty email.
At least they're reading you. That's what I'd say if I was your boss.
It used to be calls. Nobody calls anymore. They just shoot email. And that's, I've been going on for 37 years. I'm sort of used to it.
I'm 31 years into being a piñata. My wife and my son aren't always comfortable with it, but they've learned to understand that that's part of the deal.
Yeah, right. So that's just how it is, and you develop a thick skin over time, and you are comforted by the times when you think, I got that right, and look how things are getting better as a result of me pointing out that truth. And that happens not every day, maybe not even every week, but when it happens, you think that made a difference, and that's significant, and that keeps you going.
Well, I think the media, but the newspaper specifically, and television and what they report, and to some degree what we do even in social media, there is a point where you amp up pressure, on whatever that situation is, to say, here's a potential solution. And I'm sure the Baltimore Sun over 100 years, many things have wound up on that page that later on wound up happening because of the pressure of the papers on me, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I would tell you that, and I've said this 100 times, and it's I believe it to be true. The Washington Nationals would not exist if the Washington Post weren't writing a series with Faina Rueda and those guys about what's the word? I'm thinking. I just lost my train of thought. I just lost the business, the governmental business provision that baseball has that they don't have to answer to anyone.
Right.
It's not. I keep thinking eminent domain. That's not it.
No.
I lost the word. We're wordsmiths. How can I? I'm embarrassed. I'm turning red.
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
But from a baseball perspective, and having sort of the ability to just go your own way, government can't do that. The police can't do that. Crime can't do that. And when you guys step up pressure on organizations, there is a point where my Washington Post point was the paper said Congress is going to come after baseball if we don't get a team in Washington. Right. I believe that was incredibly important to Bud Selig, that the Washington Post was beating his ass and that the senators and the congressmen were reading it and they were going to come after baseball. To go after, they have a clause from 1920 something. Judge Landis, I forget. Nonetheless, I can't. It's 2 words. Why can't I remember it? I can't even Google it. But I will before the segment's over. I'll come up. People in the audience are like tweeting it to me now. But baseball was forced by the media, by the local media, by the Washington Post, to do something because the paper ganged up on them, and the media ganged up on them. There's no more ganging up here. I guess that's my point with the Sun. Going back to the first question, the gang happens when the Banner and the Sun and MAR and Jay-Z and when everybody says this isn't good, then things change. I think. I think it's
maybe. We may be past a time when traditional media can have that level of clout. I'm sorry to say, no individual outlet has the level of clout that the Washington Post had
20 years ago.
20 years,
sure.
or even today, probably.
Right.
It's that the landscape has changed that dramatically. But it's not to say we can't try, that we shouldn't try, that we shouldn't be pushing hard truths, that we shouldn't be seeking better solutions. That's eternal. But it doesn't mean that we'll necessarily have the same batting average that we had before.
Here's Peter Jensen. I'm trying to find this word because if I put antitrust, that was antitrust. Antitrust.
Yep.
I'm losing my mind.
Yep.
It took me 2 seconds to put MLB exempt antitrust.
Yep.
It was the antitrust laws that they were really concerned about,
Right.
and it was the Washington Post and the media that really, in my opinion, birthed the Washington Nationals. It wouldn't have happened had there not been the media saying to the government, "You need to gang up on this organization that they're doing wrong."
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of the political process, everything that Trump stood for, right? Like, Trump ran the country for 4 years and running himself into prison by completely vilifying fake news.
Right.
Fake news,
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
If you don't like it, it's fake news, right? Man, it's been such a dangerous thing for the society.
I think so too.
It really has been dangerous.
I think so too. And I think it's so obviously that way. My disappointment is not that there are people like Donald Trump in the world. There are always going to be people like that. My disappointment is that people don't see through it. That they don't see how dangerous that is how negative that is. And I think, this was set up by a number of circumstances, and the diminishment of the media over time is one of those circumstances that made it possible for him to go even further and completely vilify.
Well, I hope we don't diminish it further, because I appreciate what you do, what the Banner does, what all my colleagues do in trying to hold power accountable and speak truth to power. And it's harder and harder to do, and there's fewer of us doing it. And I just respect the hell out of it at this point in my life, because I know how hard it is to do. I'm witness and evidence piece number 1 and 2.
Yep.
I dedicated my life to these sports franchises, and they've thrown me out for reporting truth.
Right.
Or for the threat of maybe reporting truth.
Right.
Or for asking questions. And the only ones I've seen that come to that defense, not on behalf of my media pass, but on behalf of the owner of the baseball team, who's a born-on-third guy who thinks he hit a triple, who's sitting in the chair for a guy who's been a complete disaster for 30 years, continue to lie, and no one's even willing to raise their hand and call. All they want to do is buy tickets and go to the games, and that's not good. That's dangerous. There needs to be some accountability here, and especially without a lease. To your point, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Well,
my interest is more in that area than in what happens on the field. There is a transactional relationship here with government that needs to be monitored, and that sometimes gets overlooked as we get excited about signing stars or winning games. There's also a dollars and cents thing going on. So.
And they got to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And they should be held accountable by someone, and it's clearly not the fans at this point. I mean, there's a few of us, and we get shot at, and it's good to see you. And I'm sorry you can't have a crab cake. I'll invite you to a burger joint next time. How about that?
Next time.
Peter Jensen from the Baltimore Sun, editorial writer.
Yes.
But not editor.
No.
Not poobah.
God.
Nothing like that.
No. Just a minor underling.
It's been 37 years.
37 years.
Since I walked in and you walked in.
Yes.
My first day was January 6, 1986. What was your first day? The Baltimore
August
Sun.
15th, 86.
So I was there for 8 months before you were there.
Yeah.
So you came after Bias died. Bias died on June 16th.
Bias died, and my friend Mike Kelly came to cover it. We both came from Cincinnati. I don't know if you remember Mike.
I do.
Yeah. We just we commemorated the 20th anniversary of his passing over D.C. just last Sunday.
Well, it's beautiful we remembered his name then. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, that whole time in 86, I was 17 years old. My parents had to sign a permission slip for me to join the Baltimore Washington Newspaper Guild. I was out on the pavement the next year walking the picket line.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Where was your station on the picket line?
I was on the backside on Guilford, at the Guilford entrance on the back. Where
Yeah. I was a captain I was a captain, and we were stationed at the circulation
This
place.
is June of '87. Is that right? I think it's June of '87.
It was '87 for sure. I
It
don't
was
remember
summer.
exactly.
Well, I know it was summer. Here's why I know. I did all of my duty.
The cicadas were out.
It was '87. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was June of '87, and we went on strike, and it was I'm trying
For a week.
What did we yell? Gosh, I'm trying to think. We had a little refrain.
Yeah.
We yelled back, but we walked with the signs, and I remember I was 17. And I'm thinking, and all the guys even in the management were like, this strike's not going to last long. It'll be a week or two. We'll figure it out. We'll always figure it out. I'm like, and I'm 17, squeezing nickels, paying my mortgage, $400 mortgage,
right.
8.75%, by the way, over at Kane Street. It's 1986.
Oh, it was really expensive then. Yes, it was
right.
really expensive.
So I'm a little afraid of starving to death. But I was 17, 18, and I was 18 then by summer. And if you were my strike captain, I think it was Joan Jacobson, quite frankly.
Yeah, no. I was, like I said, I wasn't at the 501. I was up the street, 2 blocks up the street. So, were you there at the Belvedere Hotel that night we voted?
Yes.
And they turned away the train at the back entrance to Guilford. There was a paper train. It was back when the presses, of course, were there, and they were the delivery of paper coming in, and they lined up and forced the paper the train to back up on the siding.
So there was no paper to print the paper.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember that, but I absolutely remember being in the Belvedere and voting. Yeah. So what I did was I did my strike assignment with Joan Jacobson. I said, so I got 4 hour, whatever it was, duty, 3, 4, 5, 6. I said,
well, you would have had an early start because of your alphabetical disadvantage.
Aparicio.
Yeah. So your shift
I should have been a Wagner,
your
or
shifter,
a Zentz,
yeah,
or
exactly.
a Young, or something
I
like
was
that.
midday because Jay worked out great.
Well, I did my duty, and I did like 4 in one day. I did like a whole day of walking.
Wow.
And they gave me 3 days off. I went to Ocean City.
Oh.
I met a girl.
Oh.
Hi, Carol. Hope you're well. Good to see your grandkids. So I remember the girl I met. So Peter Jensen is here. We walked the picket line together 36 years ago.
36 years ago. Yeah, 36 years ago.
It all worked out all right. We're still feeding ourselves.
All right.
Although he's not eating shellfish, even though we're at Faley's. That means more oysters for me. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake and Oyster Tour in September for our 25th anniversary. It is all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. Instant scratch-off. You get to play if you want to play. Free ticket there for Peter Jensen from the Baltimore Sun. We're giving tickets out here at Faley's. We're going to be on Thursday of next week in Middle River. We're going to be at McFall's Oyster and Reel. I keep wanting to say Iron Horse Tavern because that's the one near my radio station. This is a new location over Middle River, the old Sioux Island. We're going to be there Thursday from 2 until 5. We'll have great guests as well. My thanks to Peter Jensen. My thanks to Damie Hahn, to all the guests we've had here, including at Captain Larry's as well. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And on behalf of our friends at Window Nation, I'm rolling the windows up because it's springtime. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore positive.